Hello everyone. Uh, this is Sheba Joy. Welcome to my channel Zion Shekinah Official. Zion means God's dwelling place and Shekinah is God's glory. Today I want to talk about Saul. Who is Saul? Saul is the first king of Israel. Now, when the Israelites, have seen for many years how God was with them and then fought through the wars and fought through the battles and fought through every hardship and all that, yet they wanted someone to rule over them. They wanted a king. They no more wanted to depend on God. They thought that was a more of a serious job. That was more of kind of like a tense job. That was more like a job which required a lot of their dedication. And so they, knowing the power of God, knowing what He has done for Israel in the wilderness, in Egypt, and all across, they before they even went into the in the Israel, and they were camping there, they were almost settled there. They wanted to have a king over them. So they plead with Samuel, and Samuel was a prophet at that time. We know about Samuel, and then they ask Samuel that they want a king, but Samuel says, look, I'm not giving you a king. God is the king over you all. But they don't listen. They pressurize him, and then he reluctantly chooses Saul to be the first king. Now Saul, if you read in 1 Samuel 13 chapter, he was the first verse, it says, Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. So Saul eventually becomes a king of Israel, the first king of Israel, and he reigns over 42 years. Now, what happens in the same chapter? Jonathan goes and attacks the Philistines. And when he does that, the Philistines at that time the Philistines are enemies to Israel. But when they see that Jonathan has attacked them, they become very angry at Israel, because they know that Israel is going to take over. But this untimely battle, untimely war rakes these enemies up, and then they assemble to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots and 6,000 charioteers, and also it says like soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. In 1 Samuel, you can read that. Where is that? 1 Samuel 13th chapter, 5th verse, 5, 6, yeah. So they camp. These Philistines, they camp at Israelites. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that the situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in the caves and thickets, among the rocks and in the pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. That means they escaped. So, and Saul remains at Gilgal, and all these people, they become very scared, because they see that the Philistines are large in number. The Philistines are numerous, and if you have seen the history of Israel, the Israelites are very few compared to all the other nations in the world, right? Even today, they're very few. Their country is also very small. And they're very few. Unlike India, we have unlike India, even though it has a larger place, the states are 31, but Israel is a small nation. And if you see United States, the land is more, and they have 50 states, so it's even bigger. So, but then here, what happens is, so these people, what's his name? Saul, he rests at Michmash, in that place. And then all these people get very scared. The Israelites, they get very scared. Some of them even cross, and then they go off to Jordan. And then they also cross the Jordan River, and then they go off to the land of Gad and Gilead. But Saul remains in Gilgal. and all his troops with him, because they were very fearful, because the battle was very severe, and they went and attacked without any warning or battle. And if we see in the previous chapters, they always inquired of the Lord. They have to inquire of the Lord. They have to at least seek Samuel's yes or no, but they haven't done that. So what happens is, they wait. Now here, what I'm trying to bring out, the main point here about Saul is why he remained as an unsuccessful king, though he was, we can say he's a Christian. Because at that time there was only Judaism left. There was only like Israel believed in Yahweh God. So though he knew God, though he knew that Yahweh, though he knew Jehovah, he did not heed to his obedience. So what he does is, all his it says in 1 Samuel, which is that verse, 7th verse, Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him, with quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offerings. So just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrives. So here what happens is, Samuel, out of his ruthlessness, out of his no knowledge about God, out of his not much devotion to God, what he does is, at Gilgal he stations, and because they are just fearful, what he does is, he tries to bribe God. He goes into he goes and then he does, he says he brings the burnt offerings, and he also offers the burnt offerings, and he doesn't wait for Saul. Samuel. Samuel tells Saul that he's going to be there in 7 days, but he doesn't come. So in this time, Saul thinks, he has not come. So what is there to give a burnt offering to God? But who does burnt offerings in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament today? It's only the priests, it's only the pastors, it's only the bishops who do that, because they are ordained to do that kind of work. They are and they are also anointed to do that kind of work. It's only them who have to offer burnt offerings. But here, Saul does that. As soon as he does that, Samuel comes and he arrives at the situation, and he asks him at 1 Samuel chapter 13 verse 11. He says, "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." Then Samuel says, "You have done a foolish thing." So here, when Samuel arrives, Saul already finishes what the priests or the pastors or the anointed men or the ordained men for that work, God's work, had to do. He doesn't leave that to Samuel. He does it. And when he does it and Samuel sees that, he said, "What have you done?" And he says, "Oh, because I was very scared." Saul says, "I was very scared. My men are leaving. They're not being with me for fighting the battle. And so I thought I'll just do the burnt offerings, so that, I will... It's like bribing God. But at the same time, it's not exactly what he says. But he means that. But what he says is, I was compelled to do that." Compelled means I was forced. I wanted to, in a haste. So anything that is done out of force and not out of a devotion, God does not accept that. We all know that. So he does that. Listening to this, Samuel says, okay, in 13 verse, the same chapter, 13th verse, 1 Samuel 13, it says, "You have done a foolish thing," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure," the Lord said. "The Lord had sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Then, so this is what happens. Now, because he has done a foolish thing, Samuel says, by doing the burnt offerings, Samuel says that God will punish him, that God will take away his kingdom, that he will no longer he will no longer rule Israel at the set time, and he will also be and he's also under God's scrutiny. Why? Because he disobeyed. See, there's a story to be learned here. First thing is, in terms of Saul did not obey God's voice. Saul did not heed or listen to God's voice. He went into the battle. Jonathan goes and fights without even inquiring the Lord. Leave alone the Lord, they don't even inquire Samuel. So they go into the war, and then they fight this battle, and then they see that the Philistines are large in number. They go without God's permission, so the Philistines they come back to fight. When they see that, Saul's men actually flee, and then Saul is only left with his army and his small troop of people at this what is that place, Michmash. So, and then he says, oh, because I've done that, let me immediately now go and pacify God. Let me see if God can help me. Let me see if God can do what he can do for us, because anyway he loves us. So with this mindset, he goes and does the burnt offerings, which is another sin again. Why? Because the burnt offerings in those days, or in these days, you just don't go into the church and do your part when you're a lay leader, and when you're not anointed, when you're not a pastor, when you're not ordained, you just don't go into the church and act like a pastor, right? That is set apart. Now, in those days also, when Samuel the prophet was a priest, he does the work of the priest by doing the burnt offerings. And actually there's a ritual to be done. There's a way the priest done. He cleanses himself. If you see in Deuteronomy and all that, the priest actually has to cleanse himself. He has to purify himself. He has to clean himself. He has to go before the God. He has to ask when, and then he has to go in all submission and holiness before God, and then offer burnt offerings. But here Saul, in all his ruthlessness, in his wickedness, in his foolishness, he does that. So three things he does over here. First thing is, he doesn't ask God if he has to go against the enemies. Yes, they are enemies. If they are Saul's enemies, they're God's enemies also. But he should have inquired of God. He doesn't do that. Second, he goes and disobeys. He thinks God can be bribed. He thinks that by offering burnt offerings to God, God will be pacified, or he will be bribed. Third is, he disobeys the church rituals, the temple traditions, the sanctity of the temple, the holiness of the temple, by going and doing the burnt offerings when the priest is supposed to do. So, taking that story and applying in today's world, we Christians, sometimes some Christians also operate in the same way. They think God can be bribed. Just because they are Christians, they think they can do any sin, any kind of wickedness, any kind of dirty stuff, any kind of sin, any kind of debauchery, any kind which is not right in the Word of God, which is not right before God. They think they can do that, and they go very specially, covering up all their sin, in their wearing their good clothes or whatever clothes and everything, and go before God and then try to pacify him, try to bribe him, try to do the by putting lots of money in the church, or try to even being in the good books of the pastors or the priests or the bishops or something like that. They try to do all those things, but those things do not work. Why? Because God looks at the obedience of man. And when the obedience of man is not in alignment with God's will and his word, then God brings curse. And see, just for these three things, and Saul was not a wicked man. He was not a wicked man like King Ahab, who was a very wicked man, or other kings in the Bible who were also chosen, who were also in the worshipping God, who also knew Yahweh, who also knew Jehovah, who became the kings of Israel. They were very wicked, some of them. So he was not a wicked king like that. He was a good king. He was a normal king. But in his ruthlessness, in his foolishness, in his disobedience to God, he does this. And what happens ultimately? He loses the kingdom. So Christians here, when they know the word of God, they cannot play with the word. They cannot play with God. Why? Because God looks at the obedience. Again, I'm repeating this, that God looks at the obedience of man. God looks at the obedience and the devotion of man. God looks at the way man has to worship God. See, we are all under Him, right? We're all under Him. We need to look up to Him for whatever reason that is, whether we're going in a battle, whether we want to go for a decision to do something there, or whether we're in a fix of anything, but we have to like always look up to God and ask for this, ask for whether we should do it or not. And who did that? King David, all the time before he went into the battle, he used to ask God. He used to ask Yahweh, Jehovah, Jesus, God, Emmanuel, God with us. He used to ask him. He used to ask and say, should I go into the battle, Lord? Will you give my enemies in my hands? Will you give me victory? And if the Lord says yes, he used to go. And why? He was also a man of prayer. He used to go before God 7 times a day and worship and pray, and then take a decision and then fight wars. So, but Saul did not do that. He didn't have any devotion to God. But he was only called in today's world, many people are Christians. Many people go to church. Many people do, put lots of money in the in the churches, which is all good. But when they are wrong before the eyes of God, they are wrong. When they are wicked before the eyes of God, they are wicked. And when they are not doing the right things before God, they are destined to be destroyed. They're for sure to be destroyed. They're for sure to be punished by God, and they're for sure to be avenged by God. Why? Because, see, our God is not a God of other religions where you put some things before those per se as deities, or some with a small g as gods, and then they say, oh, everything is over, you're bribing those things, and then they give you a favor and things like that. He's not a God like that. Why he's not a God like that? Because he functions in holiness that no other deity functions. He functions in purity that no other thing functions. He functions in wholesome. He functions in loyalty. He functions in truthfulness. There is no blemish on this God, on Yahweh God, on Jehovah God, on Jesus God. So there is no blemish on him at all. So when he is all holy, and he's seated in the heavens, right? What is this heaven? Heaven is a pure place. Heaven is a clean place. Heaven is a beautiful place, and heaven is a truthful place. So he doesn't reside on the earth where culprits are there, wicked people are there, good people are there, saints are there, normal people are there, those who do both good and bad are there, all kinds of people are there. And so earth is polluted, just as how it is polluted by chemical things, it's polluted by people's behaviors also and attitudes here. So he doesn't reside here, he resides up in heaven. But what does he do from heaven? He brings judgment on the people that think they are Christians and they want to do the right thing, and they think that they are doing the right things, but they are under the subjection of God's destruction. They are under the subjection of God's devastation. They are under the subjection of God's punishment and judgment. So it's very important that living a Christian life is not easy. It's always like people have to have a check. People have to know that who are Christians, who are followers of Christ. When are you a follower of Christ? You're a follower of Christ when you do everything under God, everything before God, right? It is not easy. It's not easy because many times people fail, and that's okay. But the thing is, people fail and people commit sin in their weaknesses, that's okay. But knowing that they're not supposed to do something that is wrong, that is bad, that is evil, that is wicked, yet they go out and do all those things, for those people God is definitely going to bring down the punishment, avenge them, bring judgment on them, destroy them, like how he did to Saul. For these 3 things, Saul was moved out of the country. Saul was replaced by King David. Saul had to, forgo his kingdom, and Saul had to, and Saul actually was killed. Right? He was killed. He didn't have a normal death like David. David lived for many, many years. He died in his very old, ripe age. It says in the Bible, he died a peaceful death. So, having to do so many wars, having to fight so many wars, battles, and all that. And he was a great warrior. Saul also was a great warrior. But the difference between both of them is David understood God's heart. David understood the laws of God. David understood what his perspective is when he says that he believes in God and he's obedient to God. But Saul did not understand those things. So it's very important for us to just not be called as Christians and act foolish, because it's all over the world, all over the religions of the world. They say, oh, if you do wrong, you are going to face the karma. That means you do wrong, and so your own things will revert back to you. But it's not like that here in Christianity. What happens is we have a God who judges. We have a God who sits on the throne. We have a God who says, oh yeah, she has not done the right thing. Let me punish her like this. Let my judgment come on her. Oh, he has not done the right thing. Let my punishment come on him. Let my judgment come on him. And his judging things for each person is different. His punishment for each person is different. So we have to know about that. We have to know and be very, very careful in the walk with God, because it's not just that others believe in other religions for their sake that karma follows them, and then some also feel that, oh, because they've not done this right thing, so they turn into a dog or a cat or a animal or something like that. No, it's not that. Here, after judgment, they're going to go straight to hell. There is no dog form, there is no cat form, there is no animal form, there is no any other form. It's only to be burnt in hell. And Christians have to realize that very, very strictly. Otherwise, they shouldn't be called Christians. They cannot be called as Christians, or they shouldn't even I don't want to say anything, but when they know and act as Christians and call themselves Christians, I think this is very, very important for them to understand and know the wrath of God also, because it's another simple example that I'm thinking of here is, you can be in a house, and parents are bringing you up in a nice way, but you're going out and stealing people's stuff and doing all the wretched things and come back and think the parents don't notice. No, at some point they will, right? At some point the parents are going to punish. It's the same thing before God too. It's the same thing by our God. Why? Because he's a holy God, as I said before. He's a holy God. He doesn't like anything that is not right in his eyes. That's why he gave us the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testaments are all about laws. This is, yes, even the New Testament is about the laws. Why? Because when Jesus came in the New Testament, he also talked about the law of Moses. He said the law of Moses says this, so we need to do that. Don't you think we should do that? He told that to Pharisees and Sadducees, who were very much the law people, who were like in the law, doing the law. So the Bible is a compilation of everything, and a Christian, whether if he calls himself a Christian, if he calls herself as a Christian, there is a mandate to be done, there's a mandate to be accomplished, there's a way of living there, you can't live as you please, you can't live as you want, you can't live as you think you should live. No, this good and bad don't work with a Christian. Even the goods, sometimes there was one person who actually said, I don't remember who said that, but I read the post on the Instagram, and it said, and I don't know, she or he, I don't know the name, I forgot, I'm sorry, but they said, the good always can be good before God. Your good, if you think something is good, is not always good before God. If you think something is bad, is also not, is also bad before God. But mainly, they were trying to say that what Christians think is good is not good before God. That means how much more should you examine, yourselves? How much more should you actually dissect your behaviors and your attitudes, and then lay them on the surgery table, and then see everything. See, for example, I'm saying this because I was thinking of this when I was in intermediate and degree. We had to do a lot of dissections, and in intermediate, we had this frog dissection, and then we literally, they were given formaldehyde, and and they were not dead because we had to see the heartbeat, and so we had to like pin them on the in the tray on the wax board, and then pin these frogs with, it has legs, right? So pin them on four corners, and then cut open first, put them on the ventral side. That means lay them on back on their side. Lay them on their back side, and then the dorsal side, which is the front side, we had to like cut first the skin, and the frog skin is very easy to cut. It's not like, it doesn't stick as a human flesh sticks to the it doesn't stick as a human skin sticks to the flesh, it's separable. So you cut that, and then you with the scissors you make an incision with the scalpel, and then you cut for the easy incision into the flesh, and then when you open it, you see all these organs in the frog. So here what I'm trying to say is Christian life is also like that. We need to cut ourselves and see where are we going wrong, what are we thinking, what are we doing before God that is wrong, that He says is wrong, why and how and why do we, and why should we do that? Because there's repercussions to our actions. There are gifts, and also there are punishments for our actions before God, and that's for every Christian. So this is what I wanted to do, bring Saul's true story of the biblical times into today's life, because we also most of the time, like Saul, we don't do what we are supposed to do, but we have to know that God is very strict on those things. He's a God who's also merciful. He's a God who's also very, very gracious. But just like our parents, at one point they they punish the children, right? If they do wrong, they punish them. They won't be like, oh, he's our son, oh, she's our daughter, we can't do anything, we just have to love them, it's okay. And then they won't overlook, nor will they be quiet about it, but they will, in their own way of discipline, they will either hit them, or they will either bring correction in the way that their family rules and regulations are, by taking away the TV, or by not doing other things, I don't know what, but these things they do it so that the child knows that it is wrong, and it is expected by parents that they are not supposed to do what they have done. So the same is with God too, and here Christians have to know that, like they have to every day, like how King David said, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, he says. Why? Because away from God's presence, meaning in the presence of devil, in hell. So he says that. So every day Christians have to be checked. They just can't think they are doing some good. Okay, they do some charity, they go to the old age homes, they go to the orphanages, they go to the widow places, they go to the jail prisons and all those things. It's fine, they do some duties over there, but that doesn't mean that God is not going to punish you if you're wicked and you're doing something wrong to the other person, or if you're being wicked to the other person, or if you're cheating the other person, or if you're stealing something from that other person. He's not going to be quiet on that. So this needs to be drilled into your heads, that God is God, and He has a place to love, He has a place to be merciful, and He has a place to be gracious. At the same time, He is on the throne, which means He's the king, and He has a place to judge, and He has a place to, and He has judgment scales for people, for Christians especially. So that is what I wanted to talk about today, and thank you for listening. May the Lord bless this word. Thank you.